Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the TDF Indomitable and watched her world die. Through the massive windows that stretched across the front of the ship, she could see Earth burning. Orange and red flames covered the continents she had known since childhood. The blue oceans were turning black with smoke and ash. "Captain, we need to leave now," said Commander Torres from her position at the weapons control station. Her voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the pain underneath. Torres had family down there too. They all did. Sarah looked at the tactical display floating in front of her. Red dots filled the screen. Each one was a Zephyrian warship. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They had come from beyond the outer planets like a swarm of angry insects. The Earth Defense Fleet had tried to stop them. Most of those ships were now floating debris around the planet. The Indomitable was one of only 12 ships left. 12 ships out of the 300 that had started the battle 3 days ago. They were all that remained of humanity's space. "Navy, sir, the evacuation transports are ready to jump," reported Lieutenant Kim from the communications station. "They're waiting for our signal," Sarah nodded. Behind them, 20 large transport ships carried the last survivors they could save. Maybe 50,000 people total? It was not many compared to the 8 billion who had lived on Earth, but it was all they could manage. "All ships, this is Captain Chun," she said into her communications headset. "Execute emergency jump protocol, scatter pattern Delta." "Good luck to all of you." One by one, the transport ships vanished in flashes of blue light. Their quantum drives bent space around them and sent them far away from the dying world. Sarah hoped they would find somewhere safe to land, somewhere the Zephyrians would never find them. "Captain, enemy ships are moving to intercept us," Torres said. "We have maybe 2 minutes before they're in weapons range." Sarah looked at her crew. These people had followed her for 3 years. They trusted her to get them home safe. But home was gone now. There was nowhere left to go except away. "Lieutenant Patel, prepare the quantum drive for emergency jump," she ordered. The young officer at the engineering station looked up with worried eyes. "Ma'am, the drive is still damaged from the last battle. The quantum matrix is unstable. If, we try to jump now, I cannot promise what will happen." "What are our choices?" Sarah asked. "We can try to repair it, but that will take at least an hour. Or we can jump now and hope for the best." Sarah looked at the tactical display again. More red dots were moving toward them. The Zephyrians were not going to give them an hour. "Prep for immediate jump," she decided. "Set course for the Centauri." "System, yes ma'am," Patel said. His fingers moved quickly over his control panel. "Quantum drive charging. Warning lights are showing all over the system, but we can make the jump." "Enemy ships in range," Torres announced. "They're targeting U.S. Jump now," Sarah ordered. Patel pressed the activation switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship began to shake. The lights on the bridge flickered on and off. Sarah could hear a strange humming sound coming from somewhere deep in the ship. It was not the normal sound the quantum drive made. "Something's wrong," Patel said, sweat forming on his forehead. "The quantum field is not stabilizing. It's growing stronger instead of leveling off." Through the windows, Sarah could see space itself beginning to bend and twist around them. Stars stretched into long lines of light. The burning Earth began to look strange, like someone was pulling it apart and putting it back together at the same time. "Cut the power," Sarah shouted over the growing noise. "I'm trying," Patel replied. "The system is not responding. The quantum matrix is creating its own power now. It's feeding on itself." The shaking got worse. Sarah had to hold on to her command chair to stay standing. Around the bridge, her crew grabbed whatever they could to keep from falling. The computer screens flickered between normal displays and strange patterns of light and color. "Captain," Torres called out, "look at this." Sarah turned to see what Torres was pointing at. Outside the windows, Earth was changing. The planet seemed to be moving away from them, but not in the normal way. It was like watching someone slowly turn down the brightness on a light. Earth was getting dimmer and smaller, but the stars around it were getting brighter. "The quantum field is tearing a hole in space-time," Patel explained, his voice filled with amazement and fear. We're not just moving through space. We're moving through time itself. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Time travel was still just theory. No one had ever actually done it before. The quantum drives could bend space, but bending time was supposed to be impossible. How do we stop it? She asked. I don't think we can, Patel said. We just have to ride it out and hope we survive. The humming sound grew louder and higher in pitch. Sarah could feel it in her bones now. The ship continued to shake, and she wondered if the hull could handle the stress. If the Indomitable broke apart during the jump, they would be scattered across time and space. No one would ever know what happened to them. All hands, prepare for emergency landing, she announced over the ship's communication system. Secure everything that can be secured. This is going to be rough. For several more minutes, the ship continued its strange journey through whatever the quantum drive had created. Sarah watched the view outside change from normal space to something that looked like a tunnel made of light and color. She could see patterns moving in the walls of the tunnel, but they hurt her eyes to look at directly. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The shaking ended, the humming sound faded away. The lights on the bridge returned to normal. Outside the windows, Sarah could see normal space again, filled with normal stars. Status report, she called out. All systems coming back online. Torres reported. Hull integrity is good. No major damage detected. Navigation systems are working, added Lieutenant Kim. But Captain, you need to see this. Kim transferred her display to the main screen. Sarah looked at the star chart and frowned. She did not recognize any of the star patterns shown there. Where are we? She asked. I don't know, Kim did. None of these stars match anything in our charts. It's like we're in a completely different part of the galaxy. Or a completely different time, Patel added quietly. Run a full sensor sweep, Sarah ordered. Find out what's around us. For the next several minutes, the crew worked to figure out where and when they were. The sensors picked up radio signals from nearby star systems. The computer analyzed the signals and compared them to known languages and codes. Captain, Kim said, her voice sounding strange. I think you need to hear this. Kim played one of the radio signals through the bridge speakers. Sarah could hear voices speaking in a language that sounded almost familiar. After a few seconds, the computer finished translating it. This is Imperial Station Omega 7, the translated voice said. All ships approaching the Kronos system must submit to inspection. By order of the Zephyrian Empire, this sector is under military control. Any vessel that does not comply will be destroyed. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The Zephyrian Empire, the same aliens who had just destroyed Earth? But how could they be here? How could they already control this part of space? Kim, when were these signals sent? She asked. Kim checked her instruments. According to the computer, these signals are current. They're being broadcast right now. That's impossible, Torres said. We just left Earth. The Zephyrians were just starting their invasion. They can't already control other star systems. Unless, Patel said slowly, we didn't just travel through space. We traveled through time too. And we went forward, not backward. Sarah stared at the star chart on the main screen. If Patel was right, then they were not just lost in space. They were lost in time too. And if the Zephyrians already controlled this part of the galaxy, then they had been traveling through time for much longer than just a few minutes. Computer, analyze the technology level of these radio signals, she ordered. The computer worked for several seconds before responding. Technology level is approximately 800 to 1,000 years more advanced than current Earth standards. The bridge fell silent. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to process what she was hearing. 800 years. They had traveled 800 years into the future. Earth was not just destroyed, it had been destroyed centuries ago. Everyone they had ever known was long dead. Captain, Torres said softly, what do we do now? Sarah opened her eyes and looked at her crew. These brave people had followed her through hell, and now they were stranded in a future where their entire civilization was nothing but a memory. But they were still alive. They still had their ship. And if the Zephyrians thought humanity was extinct, then maybe that gave them an advantage. We survive, she said firmly. We learn about this new time we're in, and we figure out how to make the Zephyrians pay for what they did to our world. She turned to Kim. Plot a course for the edge of this star system. Keep us away from those Imperial stations. We need to stay hidden until we understand what we're dealing with. Yes, ma'am. Kim replied as the Indomitable began moving through the strange new universe they found themselves in. Sarah wondered what they would find. The galaxy had clearly changed a lot in 800 years. But one thing had stayed the same. The Zephyrians were still out there. Still conquering and destroying. Sarah made herself a promise. Somehow, some way, she would make sure they paid for Earth, even if it took another 800 years. 3 days had passed since the Indomitable arrived in the future. Captain Sarah Chun stood in the ship's briefing room, looking at the holographic display that showed the star system they had entered. Her senior officers sat around the table, all of them trying to understand their new situation. What have we learned so far? Sarah asked. Lieutenant Kim activated her datapad. We've been monitoring Imperial communications for 72 hours. The good news is that our translation computers can understand their language. It's evolved from the same Zephyrian we encountered at Earth, but it's much more complex now. And the bad news? Asked Commander Torres. The Zephyrian Empire controls everything, Kim replied. I mean everything, Captain. They have conquered the entire galaxy. There are no independent worlds left, no free species. Everyone serves the Empire. Now, Sarah felt a cold weight in her stomach. She had hoped that maybe some part of the galaxy had remained free during the 800 years they had been traveling through time. But it seemed the Zephyrians had finished what they started at Earth. What about other humans? Asked Lieutenant Patel from his position at the engineering station. Are there any human colonies out there? Kim shook her head sadly. According to the Imperial records we've been able to access, humanity was completely eliminated during the first century after Earth fell. The Empire spent a lot of effort hunting down every human settlement and transport ship. They wanted to make sure none of us survived. The room fell quiet. Sarah could see the pain on her crew's faces. They had known their families on Earth were gone, but they had held on to hope that maybe some humans had escaped to distant colonies. Now even that hope was dead. There is one piece of interesting information, Kim continued. The Imperial communications mention a heavily fortified world called Kronos Prime. It's the regional capital for this part of the galaxy. According to what we've intercepted, it's supposed to be the most defended planet in the Empire. How heavily? Defended? Torres asked. Kim brought up another display. Very heavily. Our sensors show over 200 warships in orbit around the planet, plus dozens of space stations armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The planet itself has shield generators that can protect it from any attack. Sarah studied the information. Kronos Prime was clearly important to the Zephyrians. What makes this planet so special? It's where they store their most important military equipment and research, Kim explained. And it's also where they keep their historical records, including records about the species they've conquered, including records about us, Sarah realized. Yes. Ma'am, if we want to understand what really happened to humanity, that planet is where we'll find the answers. Sarah walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a world that held the complete story of how her species had died. Part of her wanted to know the truth, but another part was afraid of what they might discover. Captain, Torres said, we can't seriously be thinking about going to that planet. It's suicide. One ship against their entire fleet? I'm not talking about attacking, Sarah replied. I'm talking about getting close enough to learn what we're really dealing with. We need to understand how the Empire works now, what their weaknesses might be. With respect, ma'am, Patel said, our ship is 800 years old compared to their technology. They'll spot us the moment we get within sensor range. Sarah turned back to her officers. Maybe they'll see exactly what we want them to see. Kim, show me those Imperial ship designs you've been analyzing. Kim brought up images of modern Zephyrian warships. They were sleek and beautiful, with smooth curves and gleaming metal hulls. They looked nothing like the chunky, practical design of the Indomitable. Look at the difference, Sarah said. Their ships are built for efficiency and control. They're designed to look impressive and intimidating, but our ship was built for war. Real war, where you expect to get shot at and maybe die? What are you thinking, Captain? Torres asked. I'm thinking that, after 800 years of easy victories, they might have forgotten what a real warship looks like. To them, the Indomitable might just look like some old cargo ship or mining vessel, something too primitive to be a threat. Sarah could see her officers considering this idea. It was risky, but it might work, even if they don't see us as a threat. Patel said, they'll still want to inspect us. Standard Imperial procedure requires all ships to submit to boarding and inspection. Then we let them board us, Sarah said. We play the part of confused travelers who don't understand Imperial law. We act harmless and stupid while we gather intelligence. That's extremely dangerous, Torres warned. If they figure out who we really are, then we fight our way out, Sarah finished. But I don't think it will come to that. From what we've learned, the Empire hasn't fought a real war in centuries. They're used to dealing with helpless civilians, not soldiers. Sarah made her decision. Kim, plot a course for Kronos Prime, but take us in slowly. I want us to look like an old ship that's having engine trouble. Yes, ma'am, Kim replied. Torres, have your security teams ready, but keep all weapons powered down. We don't want to give them any reason to be suspicious. Understood, Captain. Patel, I want you to make some modifications to our computer systems. If they try to access our databases, I want them to see exactly what we want them to see. What should they see? Patel asked. Sarah smiled grimly. They should see the records of a small mining operation that's been working the outer rim for decades. Nothing important. Nothing threatening. Just some humans who somehow managed to survive in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. Over the next 6 hours, the crew prepared for their dangerous mission. Patel worked with the computer technicians to create fake records that would fool any Imperial inspection. Torres briefed her security teams on how to act like frightened civilians instead of trained soldiers. Kim programmed their course to make the ship look like it was struggling with engine problems. Sarah spent the time studying everything they had learned about Imperial society. What she discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The Zephyrian Empire had grown incredibly powerful over the past 800 years. They controlled millions of worlds and billions of different species. Their technology was far beyond anything Earth had ever possessed, but there were signs of weakness too. The Empire had grown so large that it was difficult to manage. Different sectors sometimes fought with each other over resources and authority. The Zephyrian military was spread thin across the galaxy, trying to control too many worlds with too few ships. Most importantly, the Empire had not fought a real war in over 3 centuries. Their last major conflict had been against a species called the Corvani, who had tried to rebel against Imperial rule. The Corvani had been crushed quickly and completely. Since then, the Empire had only dealt with small uprisings and pirate raids. Captain, Kim announced from the bridge, we're approaching the edge of the Kronos system. I'm reading multiple sensor sweeps. They've detected us. Sarah made her way to the bridge and took her command chair. On the main screen, she could see the distant glow of Kronos Prime's star. The planet itself was still too far away to see clearly, but the sensors showed dozens of ships moving to intercept them. Incoming transmission, Kim reported. Put it on screen. The main display showed a Zephyrian officer in an elaborate uniform. Sarah had studied their military ranks, and she could see this one was fairly high-ranking. His forearms were covered in ceremonial markings, and his reptilian face showed the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. Unknown vessel, the Zephyrian said in accented but clear human language. You are entering restricted Imperial space. Identify yourself immediately. Sarah stood up and tried to look nervous and confused. "This is Captain Chun of the mining ship Indomitable. We're having engine problems and need assistance. We didn't know this area was restricted." Zephyrian. Officer studied her with his large golden eyes. "Mining ship? Your vessel does not match any known mining configurations in our databases." "We're an old independent operation," Sarah replied. "We've been working the outer rim for years. Our ship is pretty old and has been modified many times for different jobs. Where are you from originally?" Sarah had prepared for this question. "Our families came from the old Earth colonies before the Empire brought order to the galaxy. We've been miners for generations." The officer's expression changed slightly. Sarah could see surprise and maybe a little amusement on his face. "Humans. I thought your species had been completely eliminated centuries ago." "Most of us were," Sarah said, trying to sound sad and defeated. "But a few small groups managed to survive in the outer systems. We just try to stay out of everyone's way and make a living." The officer turned to speak with someone off-screen. Sarah could hear him talking in rapid Zephyrian. She caught a few words: primitive, harmless, and museum. "Captain Chun," the officer said when he turned back, "you and your vessel will submit to immediate inspection. Any attempt to resist will result in your destruction." "We understand," Sarah replied. "We don't want any trouble. We just need help fixing our engines." "A boarding party will arrive within the hour. Prepare to receive Imperial inspectors." The transmission ended, and Sarah sat back down in her command chair. The first part of her plan had worked. The Zephyrians saw them as exactly what she wanted them to see: a group of pathetic survivors who posed no threat to anyone. "Torres," she said quietly, "make sure everyone knows their roles. We're frightened civilians who are grateful for Imperial protection." "Yes, ma'am." "What if they want to take some of us for questioning?" "Then we cooperate completely. Remember, we're trying to learn about them, not fight them, not yet." Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the Imperial ships surrounding them. Each one of those vessels was probably more powerful than anything Earth had ever built. But power wasn't everything. Sometimes the side that looked weaker had advantages the stronger side couldn't see as they waited for the Imperial boarding. Party to arrive? Sarah thought about the records they hoped to find on Kronos Prime. Somewhere in those files was the complete story of humanity's destruction. But maybe, if they were clever and careful, those same files could help them plan humanity's revenge. The Empire thought the human race was extinct. That mistake might be the only advantage Sarah and her crew would ever have. She intended to make the most of it. Admiral Vextar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Imperial Supremacy, and watched the strange old ship drift slowly toward Kronos Prime. In his 400 years of service to the Empire, he had never seen anything quite like it. The vessel was clearly ancient, with thick armor plating and weapon mounts that looked primitive compared to modern Imperial designs. "Sir," his aide Commander Zekalon approached with a datapad. "The inspection team has completed their preliminary report on the human vessel." Vextar took the pad and read through the information. His golden eyes widened slightly as he absorbed what his officers had discovered. "Fascinating. A genuine pre-Imperial human warship. I thought all such vessels had been destroyed centuries ago." "The humans claim it's a mining ship," Zekalon said. "But our engineers can clearly see weapon systems and military-grade armor. They've simply been disabled or modified over the years." "Of course it's military," Vextar replied with amusement. "Look at the design. Those humans built everything for war back then. Even their cargo ships had guns on them. It's no wonder they caused us so much trouble in the early years." Vextar walked to the observation window and studied the human ship more carefully. The Indomitable was less than half the size of his smallest escort vessel, and its technology was laughably outdated. But something about its design spoke to him. This was a ship built by a species that expected to fight for its survival. "Sir, what should we do with them?" Zekalon asked. "Standard procedure would be to process them through the civilian integration system." "No," Vextar said firmly. "This is a piece of living history. The Imperial Museum on Kronos Prime has been asking for authentic human artifacts for years. A complete warship with actual human crew members would be the greatest addition to their collection in centuries. You want to put them in the museum? Eventually. But first I want to study them. It's been a long time since anyone has seen how humans actually behaved during their military period. This could provide valuable insights for our historical records. Vexstar activated his command communicator. Captain Yartex, you will escort the human vessel to Kronos Prime. Assign them a temporary orbit in the outer system. I want full sensor scans of their ship and detailed interviews with their crew. Yes, Admiral, came the reply from one of his frigate captains. Should we consider them a security risk? Vexstar almost laughed at the question. Captain, that ship is 800 years old. Its weapons are so primitive they couldn't damage our shields even if they were fully operational. The humans themselves are clearly terrified and cooperative. What possible threat could they pose? On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Sarah. Chun listened to the Imperial communications through her ship's monitoring system. The translation computer was working perfectly, allowing her to understand every word the Zephyrians said about her and her crew. They think we're a museum piece, Commander Torres said quietly. Good, Sarah replied. That's exactly what we want them to think. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her station. Captain, I'm picking up detailed scans from the Imperial ships. They're mapping our entire hull structure. Let them scan, Sarah said. Patel, are our fake computer records ready? Yes, ma'am, the engineering officer replied. If they access our databases, they'll find exactly what we want them to find. Mining logs, equipment manifests, personal records of families who've been living in the Outer Rim for generations. Nothing that suggests we're anything more than harmless survivors. Sarah watched the tactical display as Imperial ships moved into escort formation around them. The Zephyrians were being careful, but not because they saw the Indomitable as a threat. They were treating her ship like a valuable antique that needed to be protected from damage. Incoming transmission, Kim announced. Put it through. A new Zephyrian officer appeared on the main screen. This one wore the uniform of a ship captain, and his manner was more businesslike than the previous officer they had spoken with. Captain Chun, I'm Captain Yartex of the Imperial Navy. You will follow my ship to a temporary orbital position around Kronos Prime. Do not deviate from the course we provide, and do not power up any of your ship's weapon systems. We understand, Sarah replied, maintaining her act of being a nervous civilian. Our weapons haven't worked in years anyway. We just want to get our engines repaired so we can get back to our mining operation. Your engines will be examined by Imperial technicians once we reach orbit. Admiral Vexstar wishes to speak with you and your crew personally. Sarah felt a moment of concern. Talking to a high-ranking Imperial officer was risky, but it was also an opportunity to gather more intelligence about how the Empire really worked. We'll be honored to meet with the Admiral, she said. Good. Follow our course and maintain communication silence until we reach orbit. The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to her crew. You heard him. Everyone stay in character. We're simple miners who are grateful for Imperial protection and maybe a little awed by how powerful the Empire is. What about weapons? Torres asked. Our security teams are hidden throughout the ship, but if they do a thorough search... They won't, Sarah said confidently. Look at how they're treating us. They see us as harmless relics from the past. In their minds, we're already defeated. We're not enemies to be fought. We're curiosities to be studied. As the small convoy of ships moved toward Kronos Prime, Sarah used the time to observe the Imperial fleet more closely. The sensors showed her exactly what she had expected to see. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful and obviously powerful, but they were designed for a very different kind of warfare than what humans had practiced. Imperial vessels were built for quick, overwhelming strikes against enemies who couldn't fight back effectively. Their weapons were designed for precision attacks that would disable enemy ships without destroying valuable cargo or enslaved populations. Their defenses were optimized to handle energy weapons and conventional missiles. but there were gaps in their design. The Imperial ships had minimal armor compared to human vessels. They relied almost entirely on their shields for protection. Their formations were perfect for intimidating civilians, but they left openings that a military mind could exploit. "Torres," Sarah said quietly, "are you seeing what I'm seeing?" The tactical officer nodded slowly. "Their formations are designed for show, not for mutual support. If one of their ships lost shields, the others couldn't provide effective covering." "Fire, and look at their weapon placement," Sarah added. "Everything is forward-facing for maximum intimidation effect. They have huge blind spots on their flanks and rear." "Captain," Patel said from his engineering station, "I'm analyzing their power signatures. These ships are incredibly powerful, but they're also incredibly complex. If something goes wrong with their main systems, they don't have good backup." "Options," Sarah nodded. The Imperial fleet was impressive, but it was impressive in the way a parade was impressive. Everything was designed to look perfect and unstoppable. But parades didn't win battles against enemies who were willing to fight dirty. "Kim, are you picking up any communications about us?" "Yes, ma'am. The Imperial officers are very excited about finding us. They keep talking about how rare it is to see authentic human technology and culture. Admiral Vexstar has apparently ordered his research teams to prepare detailed studies of our ship and crew." "What kind of studies?" "Historical analysis, technological assessment, cultural observation. They want to document everything about us for their archives." Sarah almost smiled. The Zephyrians were so confident in their superiority that they saw no danger in studying their former enemies up close. They thought humanity was extinct, so a few surviving humans were just interesting specimens to be examined and catalogued. "Captain," Torres said, "I'm getting a better look at Kronos Prime's defenses now." The main screen switched to show the approaching planet. Sarah had to admit it was an impressive sight. Kronos Prime was surrounded by rings of space stations, each one bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Hundreds of warships moved in precise patterns around the planet, their formation so perfect it looked like a complex dance. "How many ships?" Sarah asked. "I count 237 warships of various classes," Torres replied, "plus 42 armed space stations. And those are just the ones we can see. There are probably more hidden behind the planet or in the outer system." "What about the planetary shields?" "Multiple layers. The planet has at least 6 separate shield generators, each one powerful enough to protect the entire surface. According to our sensors, those shields could stop anything short of a supernova." Sarah studied the defensive setup around Kronos Prime. It was exactly what she would expect from an empire that had grown complacent after centuries of easy victories. The defenses were designed to stop massive frontal attacks by conventional fleets. They were built to handle enemies who would announce their presence and fight according to accepted rules of warfare. But they weren't designed to handle a single ship that didn't look like a threat. A ship that could get close to the planet by pretending to be harmless. A ship whose crew knew how to fight like cornered animals instead of civilized soldiers. "Kim, how close do you think we could get to the planet before they considered us a threat?" "Based on their current formation, probably within a few thousand kilometers of the surface. They're treating us like a VIP transport, not a potential enemy." "And what would happen if a ship that close to the planet suddenly started attacking their command centers?" Kim thought for a moment. "It would cause chaos. Their defensive formations are designed to stop attacks from outside the system, not from inside their own perimeter." Sarah looked around at her crew. These people had followed her through impossible odds before. They had watched their homeworld burn and somehow survived being thrown 800 years into the future. Now they were surrounded by an enemy fleet that could destroy them in seconds if the Zephyrians realized what they really were. But the enemy didn't realize. The Imperial forces saw exactly what Sarah wanted them to see, a harmless group of survivors who posed no threat to anyone. That misunderstanding might be the only chance humanity would ever have for revenge. "All right, people," Sarah said. "Quietly, we're going to play our parts perfectly. We're going to let them study us and examine our ship. We're going to answer all their questions and act grateful for their protection. And then, Torres asked, and then we're going to show them why the Empire needed an entire galaxy to stop humanity the first time. Admiral Vexstar walked through the corridors of the Indomitable with genuine fascination. He had brought a team of 12 Imperial officers and scientists to examine the ancient human warship, and every step revealed something new about how humans had once lived and fought. "Look at this armor plating," he said to Dr. Merton, the Empire's leading expert on extinct civilizations. "It's so thick and crude compared to our modern hull materials, but you can see how much punishment it was designed to take." Dr. Merton ran one of her 4 hands along the metal wall. "Fascinating. The humans clearly expected their ships to be damaged in battle. Everything is built with redundant systems and backup power sources." Captain Sarah Chun walked beside them, playing her role as a humble mining captain who was honored to host such important Imperial visitors. "Our ancestors built things to last," she said with what sounded like simple pride. "They didn't have access to the advanced materials the Empire uses now." "Of course not," Vexstar agreed. "Your people were quite primitive back then. But there's something to be said for this practical approach to engineering." Sarah nodded and smiled, while secretly she was counting the number of weapons her escorts carried and noting the locations of her own crew members throughout the ship. Lieutenant Patel was in engineering, supposedly showing the Imperial technicians their broken quantum drive. Commander Torres was in the armory, explaining how their disabled weapon systems had been converted for mining operations. "Admiral," Dr. Merton said, "I would very much like to interview the crew members individually. Their personal accounts of life in the Outer Rim could provide valuable cultural data." "An excellent idea," Vexstar replied. "Captain Chun, would you and your people be willing to cooperate with our research?" "Of course," Sarah said. "We're grateful for any help the Empire can provide. We've been isolated for so long, we hardly know anything about how the galaxy works now." What Vexstar didn't know was that Sarah's crew had been preparing for this moment for hours. Every person on the ship knew exactly what to do when the signal came. The Imperial boarding party had been allowed to spread throughout the vessel, thinking they were conducting a peaceful inspection. In reality, they had walked into a carefully planned trap. "Tell me, Captain," Vexstar said as they entered. "The bridge. How many humans are left in the Outer Rim? Your group can't be the only survivors." Sarah looked sad and defeated. "Very few, Admiral. Maybe a few thousand scattered across dozens of systems. We try to stay in contact, but it's difficult when you're always moving to avoid." "Well, to avoid?" "Attracting attention. You were afraid of the Empire?" "We thought you might see us as a threat," Sarah admitted. "Our ancestors fought against the Empire during the early expansion. We were taught that Imperial forces would kill any humans they found." Vexstar laughed, a harsh sound that came from deep in his throat. "Captain, your ancestors were indeed a threat 800 years ago. They fought like madmen and caused the Empire considerable trouble. But look around you, look at your ship compared to mine. How could you possibly threaten anyone now?" Sarah glanced at Commander Torres, who was standing near the weapons control station. Torres gave her a tiny nod. Everything was ready. "You're right, Admiral," Sarah said. "We're no threat to anyone." At that moment, Lieutenant Kim, who was at the communications station, suddenly looked up with excitement. "Captain, I'm getting a message from one of our mining ships. They say they've found something incredible in the asteroid belt." Sarah frowned, as if this was unexpected news. "What kind of something?" "They won't say over open channels." "But they're asking for immediate assistance." Admiral Vexstar looked interested. "More humans?" "Possibly," Sarah replied. "Or maybe they found some kind of valuable mineral deposit." "Admiral, I hate to ask this, but would it be possible for us to go check on our people?" "We're responsible for their safety." Vexstar considered this request. The idea of finding more human survivors was appealing to him. It would make his historical discovery even more significant. "Very well," he decided. "But my ships will escort you, and I will remain aboard your vessel to continue." "My research?" Of course, Sarah said gratefully. Thank you for your understanding. What Admiral Vexstar didn't realize was that there was no mining ship sending messages. The entire communication had been faked by Lieutenant Kim, but the Admiral's decision to split his fleet was exactly what Sarah had been hoping for. Kim, send a reply to our mining ship, Sarah ordered. Tell them we're coming with Imperial escort. As the Indomitable began moving away from Kronos Prime with half of the Imperial fleet following, Sarah felt the familiar tension that came before battle. In a few minutes, everything would change. The Empire would learn that humanity was not as extinct as they believed. Admiral, Dr. Merton said, studying her portable scanner, I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from their engineering section. What kind of readings? Vexstar asked. The quantum drive appears to be more active than it should be for a ship traveling at normal speed. Sarah's heart began beating faster, but she kept her expression calm. Lieutenant Patel has been working on our engine problems, she explained. He said something about needing to recalibrate the quantum matrix. Perhaps I should take a look, Dr. Merton suggested. I have considerable experience with quantum drive technology. I don't think that would be safe, Sarah said quickly. Our engineer said the system is very unstable right now. One wrong adjustment could cause a complete power failure. Vexstar waved one of his hands dismissively. Doctor, let the humans handle their primitive technology. I'm more interested in studying their cultural practices. But Dr. Merton was not satisfied. She activated her communicator and spoke in rapid Zephyrian to someone on the Admiral's flagship. Sarah couldn't understand all of it, but she caught enough words to know that the scientist was asking for a detailed scan of the Indomitable's quantum drive. Sarah looked at Torres again. This time, her tactical officer held up 5 fingers, then 4, then 3. The countdown had begun. Admiral, Sarah said, there's something I need to tell you about my crew. What about them? They're not really miners? Vexstar's golden eyes focused on her with sudden attention. What do you mean? I mean, Sarah said as Torres reached 0 on her countdown. They're soldiers. The bridge light suddenly went out, replaced by red emergency lighting. Sarah heard the sound of weapons being drawn throughout the ship as her security teams moved into action. The Imperial officers barely had time to react before they found themselves surrounded by armed humans. What is the meaning of this? Vexstar demanded, reaching for his sidearm. Don't, Torres said firmly, pointing her weapon at the Admiral's chest. Your people are outnumbered and outgunned on this ship. This is impossible, Dr. Merton said. You're just primitive survivors. You can't? Her words were cut off as the ship's main engine suddenly roared to life. But instead of the normal sound of quantum drive activation, there was something else. Something that made the entire vessel shake and vibrate. What are you doing? Vexstar shouted over the noise. Sarah walked to the main display and activated the external cameras. The view showed the Imperial fleet that had been escorting them. But now those ships were turning to face the Indomitable with obvious confusion. Patel, Sarah called to her engineering officer, status report. Quantum drive modifications are complete, Captain, came the reply from the ship's internal communication system. We're ready to show them what a real human warship can do. You're insane, Vexstar said. Even if you destroy my escort ships, the fleet at Kronos Prime will hunt you down and kill you. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But first, we're going to remind the galaxy why it took an entire empire to stop humanity the first time. On the tactical display, Sarah could see the Imperial escort ships powering up their weapons. They were still confused about what was happening, but their training was starting to take over. Torres, target the lead cruiser. Patel, give me everything the quantum drive can handle. Captain, Dr. Merton said desperately, you don't understand. Our technology is 800 years more advanced than yours. Your weapons can't even penetrate our shields, Sarah smiled grimly. Doctor, that's where you're wrong. You see, our weapons aren't 800 years old, they're 800 years proven. The Indomitable suddenly accelerated toward the Imperial fleet with a speed that caught them completely off guard. Zephyrian ships were built for elegant maneuvers and impressive displays of power. They weren't designed for the brutal, direct approach that humans favored. "Fire!" Sarah ordered. The ship's railguns opened up with a thunderous roar that could be felt throughout the vessel. These weren't energy weapons that could be absorbed by shields. These were physical projectiles moving at incredible speeds, designed to punch through armor and keep going. The first Imperial cruiser's shields flared and died as the railgun rounds tore through them like paper. The Zephyrians had designed their defenses to handle energy weapons and conventional missiles. They had no experience with the simple, brutal effectiveness of accelerated metal projectiles. "Impossible," Vexstar whispered as he watched his ships take damage they weren't equipped to handle. "Torres, launch missile spread," Sarah commanded. The Indomitable's missile tubes opened and fired a swarm of projectiles at the Imperial fleet. But these weren't the precision-guided weapons the Zephyrians expected. These were cluster munitions designed to overwhelm point defense systems and create maximum chaos. "Captain," Kim reported, "the Imperial ships are breaking formation. They're not sure how to respond to our attack patterns." Sarah watched as the elegant Imperial fleet dissolved into confusion. Their formations were designed for intimidation and control, not for actual combat against an enemy that fought back effectively. "Patel, prepare the quantum ram," Sarah ordered. "Quantum ram?" Dr. Merton asked in horror. "That's impossible. No one would weaponize a quantum drive." "No one except humans," Sarah replied. "We weaponize everything, Doctor. It's what we do." The damaged quantum drive began to build up energy in a way it was never designed to handle. Instead of creating a stable field for faster-than-light travel, it was creating an unstable field that would tear apart anything it touched. "You're all insane," Vexstar said. "That will destroy your own ship along with ours." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But we're already dead according to your empire. We're just ghosts coming back to haunt you." The Indomitable charged directly at the largest Imperial cruiser, its damaged quantum drive creating a field of distorted spacetime around the ship's hull. The Zephyrian captain tried to evade, but his ship was built for grace, not desperate maneuvers. The collision tore both ships apart, but the quantum field kept expanding, reaching out to grab two more Imperial vessels and shred them like tissue. "Paper, this is Admiral Vexstar," the defeated Zephyrian said into his communicator. "All ships fall back immediately. The humans are not what we thought they were," but it was too late. The Indomitable had already proven its point. The Empire's supposedly invincible fleet was scattered and burning, defeated by a single ship they had considered harmless. As alarms rang throughout the surviving Imperial vessels, Sarah made her final transmission to the galaxy. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. Humanity is not extinct. We're coming home." Captain Sarah Chun stood in the damaged bridge of the Indomitable, watching the burning remains of the Imperial fleet drift through space. Half of her ship was gone, torn apart by the quantum explosion that had destroyed 3 enemy cruisers. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the bridge, and she could hear the sounds of her crew working frantically to keep the ship together. "Damage report," she called out. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, Commander Torres replied, blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead. "We've lost main power to the weapon systems and life support is running on backup. Power only. How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours before the air runs out. Maybe less if we have to do any more fighting." Sarah looked at the tactical display. The Imperial fleet at Kronos Prime was moving toward them, but slowly. The surviving ships from Admiral Vexstar's escort force had sent warnings about the human vessel's capabilities, and the Imperial commanders were being much more careful now. "Kim, are you getting any communications from the Imperial fleet?" "Yes." "Ma'am," Lieutenant Kim said from her damaged console, "they're arguing among themselves about how to handle us. Some want to attack immediately, others want to wait for reinforcements. What about our transmission? Did it get through?" Kim smiled despite their desperate situation. "Yes, ma'am. Our message is being broadcast on all Imperial communication channels across the galaxy. They're trying to stop it, but it's too late. The signal has already reached dozens of star systems. Sarah felt a moment of satisfaction. Even if they died in the next few hours, they had accomplished something important. The galaxy would know that humanity still existed. The Empire's lie about completely destroying the human race had been exposed. "Captain," Torres said, "what are your orders?" "We can't fight the entire Kronos fleet, but we could try to make a run for it." "Where would we run to?" Sarah asked. "Our quantum drive is destroyed. We're stuck in this system until we die." "Then we take as many of them with us as we can," Torres replied grimly. Sarah was about to agree when Kim suddenly looked up from her communications station with excitement. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange. There are new signals coming from all over the galaxy." "What kind of signals?" "Rebellion communications. Planets that have been under Imperial control for centuries are starting to broadcast resistance messages. They're using our transmission as a rally cry." Sarah moved to Kim's station and listened to the translated messages flowing in from across the galaxy. What she heard made her heart race with hope she hadn't felt since Earth burned. "People of Andraxis, this is the Free Andraxis movement. The humans have returned. The Empire lied to us. Resistance is possible. Corvani freedom fighters to all oppressed worlds. If humanity can survive 800 years of Imperial hunting, we can. Survive too. Rise up. This is the underground network of Proxima Colony. The human warship has shown us the way. The Empire is not invincible." "Captain," Kim said with wonder in her voice, "rebellions are starting on over 40 worlds. The Imperial communication networks are being jammed by resistance groups using our signal as a coordination code." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Their single act of defiance had sparked something much larger than she had ever imagined. The oppressed peoples of the galaxy who had lived under Imperial rule for centuries were finally finding the courage to fight back. "Ma'am," Torres said, "the Imperial fleet is changing course. They're not coming toward us anymore." Sarah looked at the tactical display and saw that Torres was right. The Imperial ships were breaking off from their attack formation and scattering to different parts of the system. "They're receiving emergency calls from across their territory," Kim explained. "Rebellions are breaking out faster than they can respond. They're being forced to split their forces to deal with uprisings on multiple worlds." Admiral Vexstar, who had been sitting quietly under guard since the battle, suddenly spoke up. "You have no idea what you've done," he said bitterly. "You've doomed billions of innocent people to war and suffering." "No," Sarah replied firmly. "We've given them hope. The Empire doomed them to slavery. We're giving them a chance to be free." "You're one damaged ship with a crew of maybe 300 people," Vexstar continued. "Even with these rebellions, the Empire controls millions of worlds and trillions of soldiers. You cannot win." Sarah looked at the Admiral with a smile that made him uncomfortable. "Admiral, you still don't understand what humanity is really about. We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because we refuse to lose." Over the next several hours, reports continued to pour in from across the galaxy. The human transmission had done more than just announce their survival. It had reminded every oppressed species that the Empire was not unbeatable. Humanity had fought them to a standstill once before, and now humans had returned to do it again on the planet Zarian. The native Zarians stormed Imperial government buildings and declared their independence. On Corvani Prime, the descendants of the species that had rebelled 3 centuries ago rose up again, using weapons they had hidden for generations. In the Outer Rim territories, pirate fleets that had been hiding for decades came out of hiding and began attacking Imperial supply convoys. "Captain," Kim reported, "I'm getting a transmission from the transport ships that escaped from Earth. They're still alive and they're asking for instructions." Sarah's heart leaped. The last survivors of Earth were still out there, still carrying on the human race in secret? "Put them through." The main screen flickered and showed the face of Captain Rodriguez, who had commanded one of the evacuation transports. He looked older and tired, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "Sarah, is that really you? We thought you were dead when you didn't arrive at the rendezvous point." "We took a detour through time," Sarah replied. 800 years into the future, But we're back now, and we're not done fighting. We've been in hiding all these years, Rodriguez explained. Small colonies on worlds the Empire doesn't know about. Maybe 50,000 people total, scattered across a dozen systems. We've been waiting for a sign that it was time to come home. This is that sign, Miguel. It's time for humanity to reclaim its place in the galaxy. What are your orders? Sarah thought carefully before answering. The Indomitable was dying, and her crew might not survive the next few days. But the human race would survive, and they would carry on the fight. Contact every human colony you can find. Tell them what we've done here. Tell them the galaxy is ready for rebellion, and humanity needs to lead the way. We know how to fight. The Empire better than anyone else. Understood? What about you and your crew? We're going to hold the Empire's attention as long as we can. Every minute we keep their forces focused on us is another minute for the rebellions to spread. Sarah, you don't have to die for this. You could escape. Find a way to reach one of our colonies. Sarah looked around her damaged bridge at the crew members who had followed her through impossible odds. These people had watched their world burn, been thrown across time, and faced down an entire galactic empire without ever giving up. Miguel, someone has to remind the galaxy what humans are capable of. Someone has to show them that we're still the species that fights like madmen when we're cornered. My crew and I are going to make sure the Empire never forgets us again. I understand. Good luck, Captain. Good luck to you too. Take care of our people. The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to address her crew. Everyone on the bridge was listening, waiting for her orders. You all heard that conversation, she said. We have a choice to make. We can try to escape and hide like we've been doing for 800 years. Or we can stay here and show the galaxy what humanity really stands for. What are you thinking, Captain? Torres asked. I'm thinking that the Imperial fleet is regrouping for another attack. They can't let us live after what we've done. When they come for us, we're going to give them a fight they'll never forget. We're nearly out of weapons and life support, Torres pointed out. Then we'll use what we have left. We'll ram their ships. We'll overload our reactor and take out as many as we can. We'll fight until there's nothing left to fight with. Lieutenant Patel looked up from his engineering station. Captain, I might have another option. What do you mean? The quantum drive is destroyed, but the power core is still intact. If we can rig it to overload in a controlled way, we could create a massive electromagnetic pulse. It would disable every Imperial ship in the system. That would kill us too, Torres said. Yes, Patel agreed. But it would also give the rebel fleets time to organize. Time to coordinate their attacks across the galaxy. Sarah considered this option. It would mean certain death for her and her crew, but it might give the rebellion the advantage it needed to succeed. How long would it take? She asked. 2 hours to rig the overload system. But Captain, once we start the process, there's no turning back. Sarah looked at each of her officers in turn. These people had already given everything for humanity. They had left their families, their homes, their entire lives behind to fight for their species' survival. I'm not going to order anyone to stay, she said finally. We still have a few escape pods that are functional. Anyone who wants to leave can go now, and no one will think less of them. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The entire bridge crew just looked at her with determination in their eyes. All right then, Sarah said with pride. Patel, start working on that overload system. Kim, send one final transmission to the galaxy. Tell them that humanity is back and we're not going anywhere ever again. As her crew worked to prepare their final sacrifice, Sarah thought about Earth and the billions of people who had died when the Empire invaded. Those people had never gotten the chance to fight back. But now, 800 years later, their children were finally going to have their revenge. Captain, Kim said, the transmission is ready. Send it on all frequencies. Kim activated the communication system, and Sarah's voice went out to every corner of the galaxy. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the human warship Indomitable. To every species that has suffered under Imperial rule, to everyone who has been told, That resistance is hopeless. To all those who remember what freedom means, humanity is back. We are few, but we are unbroken. We are outgunned, but we are not defeated. The Empire thought they had destroyed us, but they only made us stronger. Today, the legend of humanity begins again. Today, we remind the galaxy why it took an entire empire to stop us the first time. And tomorrow, the free peoples of the galaxy will finish what we started. The transmission ended, and Sarah prepared to face her final battle. The Imperial fleet was moving toward them again, and soon the Indomitable would die. But across the galaxy, rebellions were spreading like wildfire, and humanity was leading the way home.